Hi everyone, I'm the Gnome, and today I'd like to talk to you about choice, and specifically choice in video games. Really, should there be any choice in video games? What can games bring if they don't provide choice, and what can games bring if they do provide choice? So the game that's going on in the background, just to give you something to look at while I talk about this drab subject, is BioShock Infinite, which is a lovely, beautiful, well-made first-person shooter. Does it have any choice in whatsoever? No, not a single tiny, even one piece of choice in it. It's a very linear plot and story with some small kind of shooter elements. And is that a bad thing? I think Ken Levine, who developed the game, would say no, because what the linear story allows is him complete control over where the story goes. And maybe that's a good thing. But if we're all about story, not so much about gameplay, shouldn't we just watch a film? Because that's what films can bring, is you're not in control, you're essentially a passenger. And games like BioShock Infinite, and it's not just BioShock, if you think any kind of Call of Duty franchise game, things like that are very linear, A to B, and you may as well be on rails. Now, is that a good thing? I would say for BioShock, because the story is so strong, you never really feel kind of hampered by how linear it is. Though that's not to say a little bit of choice in the matter would make things worse. I possibly think it would be better, because what do games do is put you in control. And why wouldn't you want to be in control? You could read a book. You could watch a film, as I said, watch a TV series, and that way you are just a total passenger. Whereas a game, it's your story, it's how you want to actually play the game. So I think games should provide you more choice. I would say where a good example of choice is in The Walking Dead. Now, in The Walking Dead, it's full of choices. It's full of dialogue choices. It's full of character choices, although they're not even particularly big choices. One of the best things about this game is the dialogue side. It gives you kind of 4 options. Silence is always an option, but it gives you a kind of a counter to try and do it as quick as possible. And that just gives you that extra impetus to try and kind of make a quick decision. And even though those decisions don't really change much in the game, because I understand developing a game is not easy. Developing a game is expensive, and it's very difficult to just shoot kind of one game, let alone multiple choices, multiple endings. But that just gives you kind of a more of a feel to maybe role play the game a bit more, rather than feel like a passenger. To feel like, wow, I'm actually in charge here. Things I do are altering the actual game itself. And shouldn't that be what games are? You taking control as the character and your choices actually mattering. Now, The Walking Dead, the choices don't make a huge difference. On episode 5, at the very end, the choices you've made up to that point will determine kind of what characters you've also got with. But you can complete the game with no supporting cast or with a full supporting cast, depending on how you've played it. But you get the choice to determine, I don't like that character, I'm going to kill him, I'm going to sacrifice him. And I just think that's a lot better than what we get on BioShock or COD or those kind of games, where really it's irrelevant. You're just following the train line, and it is a train line, it's going from point A to B, and there's nothing you can do about it. Mass Effect is a good example, where you do get to make choices during the game, and that just allows you to kind of role play the game a bit more. Did the choices make a huge difference at the end? No, not really. But then, why would it? Because game developers need to make the game as kind of quickly and easy as possible. And developing 3 completely different endings based on what somebody's choices in game 1 is simply impossible. But all the way through the Mass Effect games, you're making choices. You can pick who you have relationships with, what your kind of interpersonal skills with, who you keep, who survives. All makes you able to roleplay the game so much more. So that's the kind of the options. You've got a game where, like Bioshock Infinite, that takes you A to B and you must not walk off that. Yes, there's little secrets and stuff, but that's not giving you any actual choice in the gameplay. Then you've got games like The Walking Dead, where you do get to have choices, and probably this is about as much choice as you actually get in the games. Especially if you've seen my video on the Walking Dead 400 Days. The first 20 minutes in that have more choices than the entirety of Bioshock. But is there a third option? Is there an option where the player determines the story, the player determines the events, rather than the game dictating to the actual player? So what's the third way? Third way, is it emergent gaming? Is it sandbox? Basically what it is the kind of survival games that have recently come out. So if you think the likes of Don't Starve, DayZ, Project Zomboid, there's quite a lot of these now types of games which are basically a genre in themselves now, where the developers dump all the relevant tools to you, and then it's up to you to make your own adventure, up to you to have your own experiences with no real direction from anyone. Games like Don't Starve, DayZ, Project Zomboid are about surviving, and it's up to you how you want to survive. Do you want to go and try and get a gun and then shoot your way out, just end up sniping people like in DayZ? Or do you want to try and trade? Do you want to hide away, build a base? It's that choice that is left up to the player rather than given to the player. And that's an interesting way of going with things. So rather than saying, you've got this choice between going left or going right, the game basically goes, look, it's up to you. You can do whatever you want. You can go left, you can go right. Or you can not go in that direction entirely. Where that falters is story-wise. There normally isn't a story in these kind of types of games. But then that leaves it up to the player to build their own experiences, to build their own interesting quirks. And what you will get in these games is not what you'll get in the games like Bioshock or The Walking Dead. You'll get completely different player experiences because the player is in charge. And this is what games do well. It's a game, you're supposed to be in charge. Could you imagine like a football game like FIFA or PES that there was a pre-existing plot for that, and it was like, oh, you could only score 1 goal in this half, and it has to be by a header. You wouldn't accept that because you're not in control. So why would you accept it in a first-person shooter or a role-playing game or anything else? Why do we cede control of our games to become basically a watcher? Games let you be a doer, and maybe that's the kind of point I want to raise. Yes, there's a space for all 3 types of games, but I like choice. I like being in control of what I do as a character. I like being able to pick whatever I want to do. My playstyles. There are first-person shooters that are more choice-based than Bioshock Infinite. If you think Deus Ex, And also Human Revolution. You could be a runner or gunner, you could be a stealthy character, you could be a hacker character. There are games that give you those types of choices, whereas there's games that aren't. Especially a lot of console shooters that give you a choice of only 2 guns maximum, because they don't have enough keys. They don't have like a 1 to 9 key to give you loads of guns. It limits choice, and for me that limits the games themselves. And yeah, great, have your story, but include some choice elements in the story. That way, I just think people will get more engaged and want to play more. But then again, what do I know? Thousands and thousands of people play Call of Duty. But do they play for the single player? Do they play for the multiplayer? It's probably more for the multiplayer. Then you can have multiplayer, like a deathmatch, is akin to the kind of a more emergent, sandboxy style of game. Wow, Project Zomboid is getting tough these days. In that you'll go to somebody, all right, I was playing this mid game, and then I was getting sniped, and I made a run, and then I flanked him, shot him in the back. You're not normally going to get that in your kind of linear-driven games. And I think people enjoy the more sandboxy immersion games. And I think we're going to see kind of more of a push, especially in the indie side of the world, to do that. So you will get people wanting to tell a story. Even games that I love, like XCOM and Portal, very, very linear games, wanting to tell a story. But at the same time, they at least introduce some kind of new, interesting elements. So there's a place for all different types of games, but for me personally, I would just like some more choice.